Hello everybody, it's Savage14455 and I'm doing my MBL Power Rankings every week 1. And so let's get right into it. I've tried not to watch any of the battles so far. I think I've seen one of them, but that doesn't influence my rankings at all. And so this is basically just going into it, what I see in teams' drafts. And here we go. So based off the current criteria, based off the criteria I think that are most important on the team is basically does it have an identity and a core and basically is there something I can see this team being built around, and because I feel like it's the most important part of a draft, like having an identity that you can come back to every week so that you know what you're building around and have that, because once you work from that, what you do is you set a standard for what your team is going to look like, or what your team opponent should expect your team to look like every week. But if you can break off of that, it can throw huge holes in an opponent's prep, which I think just makes it that much more important to have an identity. And that goes with how well does it work together. And then there's the three major things that aren't, I guess, team building and your standard cores like FTS and Firewater Grass, which is hazard control, so rapid spin, defog, stealth rock spikes, all of that stuff. That's a pretty important, central part to a team just because of how dominating hazards are in the meta. U-turn, volt turn core, which is obviously not on every team, but a great asset to a team. And then versatility. And versatility, a lot of times people think that's good, and that's obviously why Mew is such a great mon in draft league format, because how versatile it is. But I also think that to an extent you don't want your team to be too versatile, because then every week you're having to come in with a brand new game plan, and you have nothing that you can rely on to consistently put into work. Because, or not necessarily that, but just I feel like sometimes a team can be so versatile to where it works against you, and obviously that's going to be controversial, because I feel like there's definitely I know some people who think that that's the main thing in draft league, and I understand that, but I still think it's very important to build around a solid base. And then glaring weaknesses and holes, which I think is basically just make up my tier 5 teams, which just actually honestly just one team that's really brought this to mind, where it was just okay, you have a lot of the other stuff, but you have this one thing where I'm just that's not gonna work. So yeah, that's the main criteria, and let's get into the tier list. Or I guess I have a tier list in rankings. So yeah, here's my power rankings by the division. So we'll start with Melee, just in general. We have Skrelps, Glades, Alakazams, and Braviaries. The Nakala is the Fortresses, Crobats, Jumpluffs, and Aerodactyl. And spoiler alert, that is the strongest division by far based off what I have. Even the Aerodactyls are higher than some of the 3 seeds, or projected 3 in the other division, and it's just a really strong division in general. Then we have Ulala, I guess. I'm not ever good at pronouncing that one, regardless. And the Boston Bisharks, Puppy Pouch Risus, Hannibal Hoot Hoots, and Squirtles. And this division, I would say, is probably one of the weaker divisions. The Bisharks are really high up on my tier list, so that is maybe the exception to that. But other than that, it's not maybe the strongest division. And then we get to Pony, which I really like as a division, because there's some teams in here which I wasn't too sure on going in, and don't know how well they can perform, but I can see them doing better than I have them ranked in this tier list. So yeah, to start off, I have 5 tiers in this tier list. Here's tier 5 being the lowest. And so basically this tier is just the teams that don't work for me. I just don't see this ever really working out unless they make some major changes to the team. So yeah, starting off, we have the Ninja Squirtles, and the thing with the Ninja Squirtles is that this team is the most ground weak I've seen ever in my history of doing draft. I've never seen a team that has this few ground resists. It's Pidgeot and Serena, which are the only 2 resists on the team, and then you have Victini, Beedrill, Doublade, Empoleon, Raikou, Tyrantrum, Alolan Sandslash, and Blizzard, all of which get destroyed by an Earthquake, which limits your prep against mons. For example, a Garchomp literally just shows up and clicks Earthquake, and you're forced to run Pidgeot and Serena for that matchup almost. If any team has an offensive ground type, it's over. Zygarde is wrecking Pidgeot, so it's literally Serena's your only check to that. And I guess maybe Gardevoir. It's honestly, I really wonder where that came to play, because they do have a full turn core with Beedrill and Raikou. Hazard removal is iffy. Serena's a Gerger. Serena and Alolan Sandslash, and I guess Pidgeot all can remove hazards, but and then I guess Empoleon. So it does actually have great hazard control. I take that back. Their hazard control is pretty strong because they have rocks, and I don't think this team has spikes. Looking at it, no, they don't. And so without spikes, I think that might be. I feel like a team like this, which is so hyper offense, because of how weak it is to ground, it's going to be forced to play that way. more like a spikes, maybe even a good solid screener, which I guess Gardevoir I guess could do, but still would be pretty necessary. Then we get to the Braviaries. See, this team I was on the fence about putting in tier 5 versus tier 4, but I think this just comes down to personal preference for me. They have a solid Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Honestly, their cores are pretty solid for the most part. Finny Scissorzard X is one of the better Fairy Dragon Steel Cores that is in this league, and I also really like the Shaman Zard X Finny. Like Zard X Finny is just so strong, and that's obviously why they're not last. But then I look at the rest of this team, and I'm just thinking like, okay, we have Lele as a second pick. There's so many better options there as a psychic. As you already draft Meloetta later, which I honestly think does Lele's job better in this format, just because you can run Relic Song and you can run Pure White form, and you can also run the bulky Assault Vest form. I feel like it's just a bet. Like I feel like you would never really need Lele because you already have Feeny for Fairy. Like I feel like that was a wasted pick almost. And then Umbreon kind of gets screwed over by Feeny's Terrain because Misty Terrain kind of messes up the whole toxic stall, mess you up kind of Umbreon vibe. And Shaman's also another mon that I think can abuse Toxics as well as Gligar. So the whole Feeny with that feels odd. Another thing, Piloswine versus Gligar on the same team. That's 2 ground Eviolite users. I feel like that's just the same role twice in a team. And so while this team does have some solid cores, and I can see maybe the main 6 or so working really well together, I feel like ultimately this team's going to struggle to just have enough I don't know. I don't want to say versatility, but because the team's relatively versatile. I mean, at least with Lele, I guess. Actually, you know what? That might be it. This team doesn't have enough versatility besides Lucario. And it's like there's some very duplicate mons with the team. So yeah, that's tier 5, and now on to tier 4. Okay, so with tier 4, the major criteria that I was looking for in a team for this was they're not tier 5. There's not like a glaring hole or weakness or something where I'm just like, this team will never work like there was with the last 2. And I mean, honestly, the first one was the one that was majorly like that. The last one was just like so many duplicate mons almost. So I feel like neither of them have holes in glaring non-team coherency like that one does. But these teams just, I don't love them, and I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I'm excited to see what this team can do. I feel like these teams are very limited in what they can do. But I can also see with a couple transactions, these teams becoming top, maybe tier 2. I wouldn't say tier 1 because I feel like the tier 1 teams are phenomenal teams. And even some of the top tier 2 teams could arguably be in tier 1. But I think that these teams maybe peak at tier 2 depending on if they make the right transactions or not. So to start this off, we see the Spooky Squad. And so the Spooky Squad I am not a huge fan of. I think this team is honestly, if you look at it from the start, we see Coco, which is arguably the best mon draft, which is why they went up first overall. And it's such a versatile, great start to a team. There's nothing, you can't really say you went wrong with that as their first pick. And then 8 Mamoswine, Celebi, Lycanroc Dusk, all following up for the first 5. And I think part of it could be not, other than Mamoswine, I really think there's better options for less points on those mons. I like Shaman a lot more than Celebi. But I can see Celebi's versatility with Rocker, and also as a better Nasty Blood Sleeper. So, I mean, I guess there is, merit to either of them, but it's very offensive, right? So I'm at this point, I'm thinking, okay, this is a pretty offensive team. I do not believe Lucha was drafted in this league. I could have been wrong, and I could miss it, and we'll see it later on a different team. But I feel like Lucha would have been a great round 2 pick, because Coco, Lucha, and draft, even though you can prep for it, it's something that I feel like a lot of people over-prep for when you're facing it, and so you can exploit that with other mons in your team. And so I definitely think I wish I would have seen Lucha on this team because I feel like it would have made it much better. And so then we get to the back half of the draft, which is Sobali, Escavalier, Drudicon, Weezing, Megaudino, and Gastron, which I think is, I really like a lot of those mons. And, Drudicon, Weezing, and Gastron especially, I think are all great mons. However, my issue with it is that this, it's a very, there's nothing, super extremely, I'm trying to think of a good example for Pokemon that's like that. That's bulky, there's no, stud bulky mon here, no Mega Aggron, or, no Alola or Tangrowth, or anything like that, that really, centralizes around this. And I feel like that might hurt it, and this team could easily, I think, with a few transactions, for example, if Lucha, I feel like, would be up to him, something that would make this team so much better just because of how much of an offensive threat it would pose. But yeah, that's my opinion on the Spooky Squad. So next we see the Hoot Hoots. This is the first and major sand team in the division, And my main issue with this team was not really the sand core, because I think the sand core actually is really nice. Drill, Powdon, Bastodon can benefit from it just because of the Spit F boost, and that mon pretty much lives any hit that's not fighting or ground, I guess, and Air Balloon Shuffle helps with that. I'm a huge Bastodon fan, so I can't diss a guy for picking Bastodon. And then Gigalith and Powdon, great sand setters. Both get Sand Force, I believe, which is would be huge on this team, just because they don't both have to run Sandstream, even though I can see both of them probably wanting to run Sandstream. Not getting T-Tar on this team was a huge, downfall, because normally you want T-Tar on a sand team. It's just such a great sand mod, a great sand setter, but he got 2 sand setters, that's fine. Drill with the sand is just phenomenal, love it. Hazard control is there. I forgot to mention with the last team, iffy hazard control, but I mean, nothing dealable with. Yeah, on this team, Togekiss gets Defog, Drill gets Rapid Spin, Quillfish gets Toxic Spikes. Love it. One big thing I see with this team is weaknesses, like a fighting weakness, and obviously Togekiss and Quillfish and Gourgeist. He obviously patched up some of the holes, but it's a lot of those mons, like Quillfish and, it feels like a team that's highly based around one thing, and then maybe some patchwork to fix the holes. Like Quillfish and Gourgeist, I think, are great patchwork picks because of what they cover in the fighting weakness that this team has, and then another water weakness which this team has. It was one of those things where I was really looking at the team originally, and I think I had them maybe bottom. I think I had them below the Suki squad originally, but then this team's kind of grown on me just because of those chemistries right there. And yeah, but so that's where this team is in my head right now, and I think so. As for tier 3, this tier is kind of my middle of the road. Like the team, could use some work here or there, but overall, solid build. So, to start us off, we're gonna go with the Durham G-Vols. Any team with Hoopa U, scary. Just gonna throw that out there. Hate to see that mon. Hate to prep for it. Especially when you got them on like a little Ninetales setting Veil. Like that thing behind Veil, I don't want to imagine. Mega Scissor as well, and Milotic, just so bulky. The U-turn, being able to U-turn into Hoopa Unbound is basically any great momentum into that thing is just honestly ridiculous. One thing with this team is, I would say, I'm not a huge Illumis fan. I mean, I know it gets Prankster and Defog and has some stuff to it, but I'm not particularly fond of it. I mean, this team doesn't have any glaring holes. I think it's a solid team. That's the thing with most of these in this tier. There's not really that I have anything bad to say about most of them. I just like the other teams better, to be personally honest, and that's the thing with this tier. I think in a different situation, this team could maybe retire, but not having the fastest, I guess, Aerodactyl, but this team has a lot of Volk and Veil, but I don't know if it has, besides Hoopa Unbound and I guess Mega Scissor, a ton to abuse it. I mean, actually, I take that. See, it has 3 mons that abuse it. And I guess maybe Flygon if you count that, but I feel like for a team with Veil, I would have wanted to see something. Obviously, Mega Gyarados is great behind Veil, but I feel like if you're going to draft a lone Ninetales, use it as a Veil user. Or make it a Veil team. Another thing, Fire, Water, Grass Core, kinda lacking. Tangela and Blaziken, obviously you couldn't get Tangrowth, but still. And then Fairy Dragon Steel, solid, but not something I would, not the best in the draft for anyways. The Zardex, Feeny, Scissor Core in the first round was better, or that was in tier 5, was better, and that team was all the way down there. So it's a solid team. Fire, Water, Grass Core I think is a little weak, and maybe a Volt Swisher would be nice. I don't think Illumis gets that. Just complete a Volt turn, but the 2 U-turners is good. Sashdactyl, I like this team a lot, but it's not, I guess, a top team. Next we have the Aerodactyls. I'm honestly shocked I'm putting a team with Megalodios and Jirachi this low. Those mons are hella threats, especially when you don't draft another Dark Ring mon on the team. So Pursuit Trappers, as good as they are less effective, I guess. Although I do think having the double Psychic as your big thing can lead to issues, especially when the rest of your team just hates getting knocked off. Megalodios, I mean, it's not going to eat a Dark type attack from a strong knockoff. Jirachi hates getting knocked off. Rotom Wash loves its leftovers. Conkeldurr usually needs that Flame Orb to get going with the burn. I mean, obviously you can be burned other ways, but if you knock off to that, that's usually pretty good. Crook usually relies a lot on Scarf, and that's just a nice item to have. I mean, obviously knockoff's a great move, but I feel like this team's especially weak to it. Great hazard control though. First 3 picks, all hazard control, so I cannot knock that at all. Momentum, definitely used to work. Rotom Wash does get Volt Switch, and I believe Jirachi gets U-Turn, so that is a Volt Turn core per se. And it's solid. Again, Jirachi gets Pursuit Trapped, so I'm generally not a huge fan of necessarily having a Psychic as a main part of a core like that, which is one of those momentum things because of how effective Pursuit is against that. But then again, that is the drawback to Psychic types. So yeah, overall, solid team. Let's see, is there anything I'm missing? I mean, yeah, I think that's it. It's a solid team, but just I like others better. And other than Conkeldurr, and I guess maybe for Alligator, it lacks an offensive presence. I guess see, that's every time I look at these, I'm like, is it really a bad team? And then I'm like, oh, maybe I should move it up this. But then I flip to the next team, and I'm like, oh, but this one's better. But like, it's obviously these teams are so close. I had a really hard time deciding. I was making some last minute changes, moving a couple teams around. I think you'll see it in 2 picks. I think that team was originally bottom of tier 3, and then I last minute moved it up. So these teams are all really, really close. Next we see the Puffy Pachirisus. This team's, I'm a huge Reuniclus fan, have it in another league, and I think it's a phenomenal mon in draft. So obviously some bias there. Regenerator with Audino, Reuniclus. Huge Selgor fan. I just love a lot of the mons on this team. Big thing that kind of worries me is I feel like with, let's see, how many mons that? 12 mons of the team. I feel like Swadloon and Pachirisu. Pachirisu I can respect for the mascot pick, but I feel like Swadloon's just like, throw another point, upgrade another one of your Pokemon. Like, that wasn't a necessary part. You already have a great bug type in Selgor. You already have a solid grass type in Delmise. Like, you don't need that. Fairy Dragon Steelcore is really, really good. I love Skarm. I think it's a great mon. It's obviously discount Celesteela ever since that's been added to the game. Other than the hazards, obviously. Like, defensively, I mean. Skarm's probably better physically, I guess. And I think with a team with mons like Reuniclus, which is a great special wall. Tenta obviously doesn't pair with the electric, but still a great special. The best great specially defensive mon. I think it pairs really well with Skarmory, and then I love Hydreigon, Mega Diancie around that, just some great fairies and dragons. This team doesn't, besides Delmise maybe, have a ton of Trick Room abusers, which I think on a team with Reuniclus, I like to have at least 1, or at least 2 or 3 mons that can abuse it. I think Volcarona is a huge threat, and obviously, that's why another reason I think Swadloon's like, why are you making that pick? That just seems like a wasted points to me. But Volcarona is a huge setup and sweep threat kind of mon, and Hydreigon hits and Diancie hits so hard and are great rockers, and can also prevent rocks. Hazard controls there. U-turn with Mienshao and Selgor, and I guess Pachirisu does get Volt Switch, so that's a plus. And Hydreigon gets U-turn, so a good amount of momentum. Really solid team overall. But there's nothing that makes me like, oh my gosh, this team is great, which is why it's in tier 3 and mixed around with the rest of these mons. So next we get to the Alabama Alakazams. This is actually the team I moved up last minute after looking at it, and I was doing the analysis. It was like, wait, this team's a lot better than I originally thought. And so we have Garchomp, Florges, and Kartana, which is just like, I'm a huge Florges fan. I think it's a great mon, and obviously it's outclassed by Sylveon, but in some situations it can be used to more effect just because, I mean, less HP stat obviously can hurt it in situations, but I like having a mon that's just that bulky and can be such a great wish passer and aromatherapy user. And even though it doesn't bring the same presence as Sylveon, I think it's a great, I guess not, I wouldn't say counter pick, but like great replacement almost for it. Zeraora is fun in draft. I have it in UBL actually, and really excited to use it. And I think it's just a great fit for this team because of how fast it is. It basically allows Kartana not to have to run a Scarf every week, which I think is something that Kartana can get caught into just because of how effective it is as a Scarfer. And so you can still run Scarf Kartana, but you're not going to be forced to run it to outspeed mons like Aerodactyl or basically stuff like that. You can run whatever Carton or Coco, for example. Greninja is another great fast mon. I think picking Greninja, I'm undecided on Greninja without Protein and Ash in draft, because I've seen Protein and Ash. Obviously, they're phenomenal in draft. More Protein than Ash. Ash is but Greninja is like such a great Z user, and I think this team, Greninja and Kartana, which I believe are Z users. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are solid for Z users, and so I think that's great. Mega Venusaur is a great Pokemon to this team, especially when you have Hitmontop. Hitmontop Florges is another thing. Great physical wall with special wall. It's a very bulky team while still having a ton of offensive elements, and I really like that. Volturn cores, I mean, this is just a really solid team. Again, a lot of time, I'm not to knock it for not having a Trick Room Boozer with Slowking, but I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I feel like having the option to run Trick Room is just such a powerful thing in draft. And while Trick Room's not totally the most effective, it can completely mess with your opponents, especially if your opponent's speed creeping, because all of a sudden that, like, maybe let's say you're besting 50 points into speed just to outspeed one mon, a bulkier mon, or like maybe like a Gliscor, for example, which can sometimes run mid-speed or sometimes run max. You're running just a little speed to outspeed that, or speed creeping. When you put the Trick Room on them, all of a sudden that speed creeping, I guess, doesn't help them because of, like, it's more of the speed creeping up that it messes up, because then it just refers to the tables, and you can run, you're running all your mons min if you're running Trick Room that week. So I love having, if you have a Trick Room threat, I feel like drafting a Trick Room abuser, it's really nice. And obviously, it's not a huge knock to this team, because I doubt it would have on Trick Room in the first place, but just something like that draft when you do that. So as we get to the Jersey Jump Bluffs, this team, pretty solid. Like, Mew is insane in draft, as everyone knows. I talked about it earlier. Such a versatile mon. Can pretty much be used on any team, especially a team when you draft Tyrantrum. Wow, English is hard. Tyranitar. When you draft regular Tyranitar, which is Mew's big, like, Pursuit Trap, scary. And obviously you can get a little Muck, which is the other big Pursuit Trapper. I guess there's a couple of them. But when you draft them on like Tyranitar to go with it, the bulky Psychics that maybe could use Mew as setup fodder, they're just checked now. You bring T-Tar in and boop. Landorus Eye is another great mon. This team's got a sand thing going, so that's honestly, this is the other sand team. I was trying to remember what the other sand team was, and I was like, T-Tar, wait a sec. Yeah, so T-Tar, Lando Eye, and Stoutland is the other sand core in this. Obviously saw one earlier, and this sand core, I feel like there's a lot more to it. Lando Eye, obviously a great sand user, so that's basically gets a sheer force in sand. So, I mean, obviously besides the whole life orb thing, but like, still really strong, just hits so hard, such a threat. You get Mega Sceptile, which should take electric types for Vaporeon, which is super nice, and I guess can help with, I mean, I don't know, other than that, there's not really a ton of electric weaknesses, and I feel like I would have abused Mega Sceptile's Lightning Rod a little more when drafting, just because of how, like, it's just a great, because it also resists grass so heavily that your waters get a huge boost from having that on the team, so only having one. Not my way of doing it, but obviously everyone has their different draft style. Still a really great draft. Stoutland's a great value pick, especially as a sand abuser. And yeah, Fortress is great for hazards, Salazzles, Toxic, can throw some people out. Like, being able to Toxic through Steals is really, really nice sometimes. And being able to be Oblivious, so if you wanted to run, if you were just not even trying to Toxic Steals, but wanted to avoid getting taunted for some reason, that'd be nice. Clefairy and Passimian and Raichu as well are great low value picks, because it makes mons like HPI's Coco, which could probably run through this team. Like, Olo and Raichu now can outspeed it. I mean, it also prevents the Coco for Spooky from getting it, because it would have been a great addition to his team, just as a train abuser, yeah. And Clefairy is obviously discount Clefable, and that mon is a threat and a half, so having that could obviously come in handy, and I like Passimian as a pick, just in general. So yeah, this team's really well balanced, and it's got a great sand core, and that's why I have it so highly ranked. And yeah, all these mons in this tier I really liked, or all these teams in this tier I really liked as teams, but they are not, like, this next tier is where I think it really cranks up to where, like, these teams are phenomenal, and that's why they're top, I guess, I believe it's 7, and I really liked all these teams, and so these ones where I think we're going to see the most improvement, or, like, see the most likely to win the playoffs. So first we get the Glades. This team, I was very, like, I switched this team around a lot. I've had it as high as, I think, 3rd at one point, and I've had it as low as maybe 10th, and so now I have it at 7th. Mega Mawile, honestly, just, that mon is so good in draft that I could not put it lower than 2 or 3 based off that alone. Manaphy and Latias are just such great offensive threats to go with it, and Crobat and Cinder, like, all of these mons on this person's team could pull up any given week, and I would be mortified to go up against, minus maybe Glaceon. Like, I've seen Dusknoir used repetitively by someone in another league, and the mon's just, like, it's disgusting what that mon can do. It's a bulky ghost, and I feel like ghosts are so underrated as a typing, because obviously it just resists normal biting and doesn't have any other resist besides, and it's weak to ghost and dark, but I think it's an underrated mon, and I think it's a great pick for this team, because it also helps with Porygon 2's whole fighting weakness. This team also has Trick Room, which I think, actually, if you haven't figured it out already, I like Trick Room. Porygon 2 is just a great setter, and Mega Mawile is would abuse the hell out of Trick Room, and I think that's another reason I really liked it. Manaphy's ability to instantly come in and sweep and also become a bulky water is great. Great Water Fire Grass Core. Hazard control is really solid, especially with Shuckle, which is just great hazard mon, as well as Swampert, which is a great rock setter. And I think just this team is so solid and so well rounded, and then throw Mega Mawile on top of that. It's just a great way to start off. Yeah, I like this team a lot. One of the reasons I didn't put it above the other teams, besides me liking the other teams more, was it's not, I guess, super bulky enough for my liking. Like, I'm very bulky when I play draft, generally. I think this draft in UBL is the first time I've gone more offensive, per se, but I generally like to play more of a bulky style, and this team kind of lacks that to an extent. And that's probably why I don't love it as much, but this team still has some solid bulk with Swampert, Dusknoir, Porygon 2, and Cineroar. So, yeah. Next is the Celebies. This team probably had the most shifting out of any team. I think at one point this team was like bottom 3 for me, and I was like, I hate this team. And then I looked at it a second time, and I was like, so I just hated a team with Zygarde, Azumarill, Darmanitan, Mega Kangaskhan, Cofagrigus, and Bronzong, which are ridiculously, like, underrated Pokemon in my opinion. Cofagrigus nullifies ability on contact. Like, there's some mons, like, for example, obviously he has Darmanitan, so bad example, but Darmanitan, no sheer force, which it boosts its damage a ridiculous amount, and now Life Orb is taking more recall, so when it drops a Flare Blitz, it's losing half its health, which, obviously it already loses a lot of its health, but you know what I mean. And then Bronzong is such a great defensive wall, or just a great defensive mon, and Buzzwole is another one of my favorites, like, especially since Cofagrigus and Bronzong both set Trick Room for Azu, like, again, if you can't tell, tad Trick Room bias. And then Sandslash, stealing that from the Sand teams, great idea, because all of a sudden now you have a mon that gets Sand Rush, and there's not a ton in this league that do. So having that's always nice. Masquerade's Webs, which, because the team, that's the one thing that I did have a problem with this team. A little slow Sceptile's your fastest mon, which is fine, but then your next is, I think Mega Kangaskhan, unless I'm missing something. I don't remember how fast Mesprit is, to be perfectly honest, but I believe it's slower than base 100. So yeah, if base 100 is your second fastest mon, having Webs could be nice. Mega Kangaskhan, no Seismic Toss, obviously weaker, but still by all means a very strong mon. The Water Fairy, let's see, Water Fairy, or not Water Fairy, wow, Dragon Fairy Steel Core is Zygarde, Azu, Bronzong, which is really, really good. And then Water Fire Grass is Sceptile's your grass, which obviously isn't the greatest, but Buzzwole is another, like, a bulky, Buzzwole and Cofagrigus help fill that role, which, obviously not really, but they're really bulky mons that help fill that, I guess, core. So yeah, overall, really love the team. Yeah. So, Seattle Skrelps. This team also moved around a lot. Please get a logo, because the Skrelp is sad that it doesn't have fancy stuff around it. Same with Spooky Squad, although the picture that I came up with that, pretty solid. So Celesteela basically describes this team. I love Celesteela. I think it's so great and almost busted in draft. Megavoir is also a great fairy to pair with it. Suicune, again, I hate dealing with that mon. So, like, Pressure Stall, it just enrages you. So if you aren't already going to lose to Suicune, the rage might make you lose to Suicune. Entei is a great late round pick. Hitmonchan, a great rapid spinner. Mudsdale's a bulky ground. Leafeon, you can see some chlorophyll use if someone brings a Sun team, which I don't think anyone has Zard Y, so I doubt it happens. But if it did, maybe. Also gets SD Leaf Bait, you know, your classic random battle set. Probably the weakest member of the team, honestly, is that Leafeon, but it also has the and then there's the Espeon, Sneasel, Garbodor, which I think are really quality low point picks. Garbodor's great hazards, Espeon's great hazard prevention, Galvantio's another great hazards, and so where this team lacks in, I guess, a ton of hazard removal per se, because like I guess your hazard removal is Hitmonchan with Rapid Spin, and then Espeon preventing it. Espeon's prevention does pretty much help, not to mention your opponent being forced to defog away webs, or defog away spikes, toxic spikes, or rocks from Mudsdale. The amount of hazards is honestly going to force your opponent to defog. And then I think Kamo is a great pick when you have a mon like Celesteal, which is just eating fairies for breakfast. And it's a great fairy dragon steel core. If I was going to point on an issue with this team, is I guess maybe no bulky grass. Love seeing, I mean, that's because Suicune Entei should have grabbed Raikou because then you had the legendary dogs and great the mag thing going. Probably not some spot on the tier list. No, I'm kidding, but not having that solid core. Again, I haven't used Sneasel a ton, but I've only heard great things about it. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And yeah, really like this team. Then we get Chelsea Kings. So I believe we're down to the top 3 at this point, if not top 3, top 4. And at first, I had this team as my 1. And honestly, I could make an argument for it being the number 1 team. Its top 7 mons I think are ridiculous and arguably best in the league, tied with first. Who I have as first right now. That's the only person I would argue against it. Mega Blade's ridiculous in draft. Tornadus is also ridiculous, like just great mons. Weavile, another great mon. Nidoqueen, which I think is so, like, its versatility and like the fact it can be a rocker, bulky, life orb, so much versatility there. Tangrowth, Registeel, Alola, I mean, remind me never to ever fight a team that has those 3 mons on it. Like the great regen core with that grass water. Moltres is the fire, which is great solid core there. I almost put this team tier, I almost put it tier 1. But the main thing that prevented me from doing that was its hazard removal was weak to rocks. I believe, unless, I guess Comfey gets it. But, I don't know. I feel like Comfey would be a lame defogger. But besides the point, its hazards, like Moltres and Tornadus Therian are your defoggers. And obviously, Tornadus Therian is one of the better defoggers in the tier because of Regenerator. I hate to have them all weak to flying, and I feel like a team that's weak to rocks with Weavile and Tornadus Therian and a regen core, which just gets hindered by rocks. Obviously, it's not as weak to rocks as other mons, but the big thing with Regenerator core is you can switch out in and out freely, so not have the best hazard removal and no rapid spinner is, I feel like if I had a rapid spinner, I'd have put it in tier 1. Yeah, but I really like the top half of the draft, and Gothorita's a steal that low. I mean, I really hope he doesn't pull out the scummy set where it's like Eviolite, Confide, Taunt, whatever shenanigans where you just like mess up one Pokemon and like make your opponent want to forfeit because the mon survives for so long and doesn't. Just please don't use the set. Nobody wants to watch that. And then Manectric and Maractix are like, Manectric's pretty cool for speed tiers, but he didn't really need that at that point. But I do really like this team. Also, really great logo. Actually, that was 4th. So, Columbus, I forgot about the Crobats. This team also shuffled a lot on my tier list. Not gonna lie, probably shuffled a bit after I saw the Zapdos 6-0 and OUBL. You should watch that battle. I believe it was Bloke Zapdos who 6-0'd, or not 6-0'd, but like had 6 kills and basically carried his team. And I'm like, yeah. So I already knew Zapdos was strong then, and then seeing that, I was just like, okay, yeah, this team's better than I even thought, because I forget how offensively threatening Zapdos can be. And then there's Mega Averron Sylveon, which is just a great Steel Fairy right there, and then Zygarde 10%, which is another great dragon. And that core is the second best. I'm hesitant today is the second best Steel Dragon Fairy core. Because there's probably another one that there's probably better. Like you could argue the Braviaries is better, and I'm trying to remember if the Bisharps had a solid Steel Dragon Fairy core, but I can't off the top of my head. It's just a really great core there. Necrozma, Trick Room. You know how I feel about Trick Room. We're not going to go into that conversation again. But Kamala can abuse it. Mega Aggron slow, Sylveon slow, Araquanid. Araquanid is such a great mon. Webs, Choice Banded Liquidation. I mean, if you leave that thing and click Choice Banded Liquidation, there's not many things that want to switch into it. Like, it is such an underrated mon. And honestly, as a Fire, Water, Grass core, Virizion, Arcanine, and Araquanid, looking at where they were drafted and how many points they were, that is such a valuable core. Like, I mean, getting Arcanine that late, as well as Virizion and Araquanid, just to have that, I mean, obviously it's a tad flying weak, but Zapdos and Mega Aggron could care less what flying types you bring, so that's not really an issue. Yeah, Ditto, a nightmare to prep for. This team is just so well-rounded in that regard. Kamal is a great rapid spinner, so any rocks issues, and Zapdos is a good defogger. Those issues gone. I guess the reason I didn't put them in the top is because the top two teams just really separated it. I think just with the overall, one of them has, well, I guess I'll explain the top tiers. Let's just go to the tier 1 slide. So, with the tier 1s, two of them, we get to the final two. If you haven't figured it out now, it's the Bisharks and the Fortresses. And I will say that this ultimately came down to deciding between them. Which one of them do I think is going to win it? Like, if I had to pick who would win it all today, who would I pick? And it basically was, if I'm putting 6 on the field, who am I going to put on the field? And so, while the Bisharks is probably the more rounded team, I did give first place to the Fortress, and so first we'll obviously go for the Bisharks, because, like, they're second, and we're doing it in order. But, if you couldn't figure it out now, the Fortresses are the #1 team. So, looking at this team, first 3 months, wow. Landotherius, Landorus Therian, Mega Alakazam, and Heatran. I mean, you basically could have just walked up to OU and Bisharks basically just walked up to you and said, give me your best 3 months, or 3 of your best months. And they just handed them over. Like, those 3 months are so powerful that having them all on the same team, like how that even happened is mind-boggling. And the only reason that this team isn't first is because the Fortresses also have 3 amazing months for their early picks, but we'll get to that later. Then we look at the next 3, because this is kind of how my process went. I kind of went 3 by 3 and just looked at them and compared from the Fortresses. Perimeter Haxor, Snorlax. Snorlax is such a great mon in draft, so bulky. The Spadef is ridiculous. Like, you never know what this mon's going to bring. Its issues, obviously, its stab's not super effective against anything, and it's walled by Ghost type. It gets no stab versus Ghost types, so you have to run Crunch or Pursuit, and I guess Choice Band Pursuit's a thing. But regardless, Snorlax is such a solid mon in draft because you know exactly what your opponent has. Haxorus and Primarina. I'm a huge Primarina fan. Super bulky, hits super hard. Haxorus hits it super hard on the physical side. Prim on the Spatak, special attack, whatever you want to say. The team just hits so hard. And then we get to the next 3, which are Heliolisk, Golbat, and Cobalion. All really solid mons. Golbat's a great Eviolite user. Heliolisk, great Volt Search. Let's see, Regice and Lurantis. I also really like. Yeah. So that's really my thoughts on that. It's a really great, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. There's not a weak link on this team, and that's what I think is what makes it so special. Other teams have had, like, little mons that I'm like, you could have upgraded. Like, I guess, for the Crobats, that was Abomasnow. I don't know if that, like, really fit the team. Like, oh. But this team, I could see any mon bring out any week, and that's what makes this team such a threat. And the Fortresses don't have that same bring every mon every week, but that's because I would say their top 6 could be brought every week, and they'd still probably win 9 times out of 10. And now we get to the Fortresses. Kieran, Bakal, Fable, and Ferrothorn. Enough said. That's easily, by far and away, best Fairy Dragon Steel core. Like, if I was going into a draft, I think this might be the core I pick. Maybe, most, maybe swap Ferrothorn for Rachi if you want a perfect core, maybe. Like, I mean, I have no, like, I cannot imagine having a better Fairy Dragon Steel core than that. And it's like, it's honestly, like, shocking to me how this happened. And I loved that aspect of this team. Like, you knew that if those three Mons are brought, they work so well together. Kieran Black hits so hard that there's not a switch in, really. And Clef is so versatile, like Magikarp, Unaware, obviously two phenomenal abilities. You want to set up? Oh, it's Unaware Clefable, so you actually just wasted all those times with those Dragon Dances or whatever. Oh, you thought you could Toxic Stall it? Oh, no. It's actually Magikarp. So that, like, versatility there, it makes it such a great Mon. And then Ferrothorn, everyone knows about Ferrothorn. Enough said. Super bulky, super annoying. Obviously, HP Fire is going to be running around everywhere. But if you want to click HP Fire against this team, have fun letting in Tracheon. Yeah, because that Mon is also phenomenal. And so, yeah, back to the Bisharks and Fortress comparison. Top three, I was like, okay, those two top threes are by far and away the greatest first three picks in the draft. And then looking at the next three, I was like, okay, Gliscor is ridiculous. Like, having Gliscor with those first three is just insane. And Gliscor, Tracheon, Jellicent. Gliscor and Tracheon are easily, but honestly, those two combined probably would be equally as effective as the other two. And then adding Jellicent, which I think is such an underrated mon. It was OU last gen, if I remember correctly. And it's now fallen, obviously, out of use due to Coco and more electric types being popping up, so you kind of need the ground. Which is why Gastrom's up in OU to stop Ash Bren or whatever. Anyways, back to the describing. And then we get to the next three, which is Jolteon, Delphox, and Venomoth. And like, at that point, those 9 are enough for me to think, okay, this team's best in the league. Volibee and Vigoroth really don't matter to me. Probably could pull off some meme strats with them. Respect it. Get some Eviolite Mons. But, like, those top 9 are ridiculously good. I guess I would say the major knock, but Gliscor is one of the best defoggers I can think of. And I guess Volibee also gets it. I guess the major knock would be hazard removal. But, like, Pharaoh's ignoring hazards and is going to set so many that your opponent's going to be forced to defog. And not to mention, what is your opponent, like, going to have time to defog when every single mon in this team poses a threat when in, minus Ferrothorn. And Ferrothorn's going to be setting hazards, so if you're defogging out its face, you're probably just wasting PP. But yeah, overall, team's ridiculous. If you have any questions or think I did something wrong, again, personal tier list, it's my opinion. Logan will probably release his sooner than later. But yeah, so that's what I think. Leave a comment down below if you disagree or agree with any of these, I guess, tierings. Overall, I tried my best to keep it about I mean, I wouldn't say as bad as objective, because a lot of it obviously you saw with my trick room bias. That obviously played a role, and so my opinions on what's good in draft and what's not. Definitely edited the tier list and shifted some stuff around. But yeah, overall, really excited for y'all to see this. And yeah, good luck to everyone in MBL this season. I'll probably release some other stuff later. Undecided how soon I'll release the write-ups, because I know this is probably going to go live tonight. Or if not tonight, tomorrow night. One of the two. It'll be released soon. Yeah, I should have the write-ups done by at least Saturday at the latest. But I'll probably leave timestamps for each of your teams and below, which obviously is useless now because you made it this far, you've seen the whole video. What am I even saying? I'll probably edit this part out. Regardless, been fun, Savage1445, and that's subscribe and do all of the cheesy stuff that they add at the end of the YouTube video because I don't remember at the moment. And yeah, good luck everybody.